All right, so let's begin. Good morning or good evening or good afternoon, wherever you are joining from, and welcome to Data-Driven Community Virtual Meeting. Let's start with a few words about Data-Driven Community. We have two different branches in the Data-Driven Community. One is Future Data-Driven Summit that we have annually, and the other is Cloud Data-Driven User Group. For more information, simply check the community website that we have. I will add the link in the chat in about few minutes about our data-driven community website. When you scroll down the main page a bit, then you can see the community upcoming events. On the left side of the page, you can notice the information about the Future Data-Driven Summit. This is an annual joint conference. We are leading with the multiple data platform user group partners. So this year conference is over, but I mean this is in September 2025 is over, but this year we are going to do it in September as well. So let's focus on the user group. The second branch of the activity we run are the weekly meetings of the cloud data driven user group like we are having today. And here you can follow our next weekly meetings. You are more than welcome to contact any of our community board members, Jean, Joseph, Ronan, as well as me. Jean Joseph is the founder and the co-administrator of the community. And Ronan is the second co-administrator. So I'm the moderator for this meeting today. My name is Deepthi Goguri, and I'm a database administrator and also a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. I'll be the third co-admin of the data-driven community, and I would love to connect with you all. There is a QR code if you want to connect with me, and I'll be hosting the session today. This is our next meeting. I added this. So I was like a little bit confused. Our speaker is Jared today. So this will be our next meeting, which will happen on Thursday. So our speaker is Daniel Petkos. He will be talking about beyond version control. If you did not register yet, I highly suggest you to go ahead and register for this. You can find it on the meetup. The very next meeting from today's meeting, you'll find that. So register. Together, we are here to help and serve the data platform community. And there are a couple of other additional things I would like to discuss here. So note that we disabled the chat window from this meeting. Instead, during the meeting today, please feel free to use the Q&A for any questions and discussions as well. I'll be monitoring the Q&A and I'll be posting it as it comes, right? Please note, Teams does not automatically refresh the Q&A feedback, so it is a known issue. Please remember to manually refresh your Q&A panel by toggling between the all and my posts filters or by reopening the tab. Be sure to check the Q&A panel often. The discussions and the links shared by your peers are just as important as the main slides and provide a lot of extra value to the meeting. You're also welcome to use the reactions. It doesn't interfere with the course of the meeting. If you hear something you like or love, you want to clap, then feel free to do so. Without any further ado, I'm so honored to introduce our guest speaker for the day. It's Jared. Currently, he's working as an architect at the Digital Solutions, and Jared can tell you more about himself. So please, Jared, please share your screen and add a few words about yourself.
Sounds great, Deepthi. Thanks you for the introduction. Depending again on where you are, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, as you are attending today's session either live or seeing the recording after the fact. She mentioned my name is Jared, and today want to talk to you about some exciting new things going on in the database world with artificial intelligence augmenting the way that we do our work. Going to be talking specifically about SSMS Copilot. Again, as Deepthi mentioned, my name is Jared Kuehn, currently working as an architect of digital solutions at Baker Tilly Advisory Group here in the US. But really, my goal here, supporting you, the community who's watching this today, is to be a data bard. Now, what does it mean to be a data bard? That means I'm here with two objectives in mind. The first is probably why you're attending this first and foremost. You're looking for technical nerd information. And for that, I bring in well over 10 years of consulting in Microsoft data solutions in various forms, but heavily focused on data engineering focuses. I do also have active Fabric certifications. For those who have heard about this whole Fabric thing and know that there's a lot going on there, I work in a lot in that space. But that's the technical side. The second reason is why you're here attending a session and not reading technical documentation. It's because innately we as humans like sharing information through stories. That's the way that we've done things well before Microsoft Excel existed as a product. So my goal today is to not only share a bunch of technical information, but to do it in the format of a story that hopefully helps people better understand what it is that we're trying to achieve here. So my goal today is to tell you a good story and hopefully give you some good information along the way. In terms of today's performance, quick look at our agenda. We're going to be talking about SSMS Copilot as the title suggests. So we're going to do a brief introduction and talk about setup, which I'll tell you right now, it's going to be a very simple, straightforward process. Not a whole lot to talk about there. The majority of today, the goal is that we're going to actually be looking at demonstration, seeing it in action, because it will best highlight what the capabilities are of this solution. So we're going to try and do live demonstrations. Hopefully my environment, knock on wood, responds accordingly. Always the risk of doing live demonstrations. We'll see what happens, but that's part of the fun. Q&A is listed at the end, but as Deepthi mentioned, please use the capabilities within today's meeting to raise questions any point that you have them. I am perfectly fine with answering those questions as it relates to current topics, and we'll go along that way. Sound great? Awesome. Let's go ahead and jump into today's topic. All of my presentations that I give for the community start with questions. Because we work in the data industry, we work in analytics, that means we're trying to answer questions. So here's my question for you up front. What are your concerns? If you're thinking like my buddy, Sven the Skeptic. Sven is a very intelligent human being, but especially when you say, oh my gosh, there's this brand new product, everything is great, the one thing he's worried about is getting just a sales pitch that has a bunch of, okay, maybe that's kind of nice, but not a lot of substance and not a lot of proof that it actually works as designed. So take some time and think about what I'm about to demonstrate for you today is essentially artificial intelligence that's going to have access to your database. To be clear again, it's an artificial intelligence solution that has direct access into your database. Now, what concerns might you have? Given the chat functions here, I'll at least go over a couple of things that probably might come to mind for you. Data security. When we talk about artificial intelligence today, this is one of the first questions that comes up more often than not. How do I know that when I provide information to an artificial intelligence solution that I'm actually getting security around my data? The quick answer to that, to address that concern, is that Copilot documentation, both the base Copilot solution I'm showing you today and some supplemental capabilities beyond the Copilot solution, all advocate the same thing. Copilots do not retain your information for future training or retraining of models, but also to provide some clarity beyond that, depending on the type of prompts that you provide to this Copilot experience, some of your data may get sent in as part of the prompt. That's innately how this solution would work. But the important thing to note is that it comes in as part of your prompt, but it only exists within the chat experience. Once that chat is done, boom, data's gone. It is not retained for any additional purposes. So don't worry necessarily about security concerns. Security concerns are being heavily addressed by the vendor. Another thing that might come up here is we're database people, a lot of us. Generative AI isn't innately deterministic. While it is intended to give somewhat consistent responses back, part of the benefit of working with generative AI is its creativity, its ability to think in its own way outside of the pattern that it sees and trying to give you something unique. Well, we don't like that in terms of database people, but because we like deterministic. If I run this query 1,000 times with nothing changing in my database environment, I want the same response 1,000 times. What I'll hopefully showcase today is a couple of considerations. First of all, anytime you're working with AI and there's concerns about determinism, you want to make sure you understand the temperature of the solution that you're working with. Since we're talking about a generative AI solution that focuses on code generation, I'll tell you right now, from what I've seen in documentation and from actually prompting the Copilot itself to answer this question, it focuses on very low temperature, which means it errs on the side of determinism more so than not. If you take a look at my YouTube series on this, which I'll encourage you to take a look at as an afterthought of today's presentation, what also comes into this is the prompt writing itself, the chat experience. And that's both one, when you're in that chat experience, expect to get a little more interactive. You might prompt it multiple times to get the end result that you're looking for. And what I found consistently in my experience with this tool is once it gets a query generated in the chat experience, it pretty consistently keeps that query as is unless you, the prompt writer, specifically ask it to check something. Beyond that, making sure that things stay deterministic is about our database and grounding our prompts within our database, which is what today is all about. And then the biggest concern, oh gosh, this is going to break production. Like, if this gets access into my production database, we're going to have some major issues. Valid concern, and let me at least tell you where things are at current state and where things are going. In current state, the Copilot is able to read your database environment. It is not able to write objects or write data to your database in current state. In the future, that is coming, and that is something that the community is talking about significantly to make sure that that experience doesn't break production, because that's the last thing we want our artificial intelligence solution to use. So maybe you have additional concerns beyond that, and that's all well and good, because anytime we're dealing with artificial intelligence like we are today, we should be starting with what are the concerns? What is it that I need to prove out where if I, presenter today, can give a compelling argument for you to start with this, what concerns do you need to validate to make sure that you can trust your AI experience? Without that skepticism, same as Sven has, we aren't going to be able to get a good experience with AI because innately, for it to be successful, we have to trust it at some point. Now, actually, this presentation, I'm starting with 2 questions. But that's because it's prompts. We do a lot of question writing anyways. So to talk about the solution itself, think about how long it takes to do some of the following things. Writing queries. Shock. We're in a database. We want to write queries. But a lot of times there's parts of the query that we need to write as humans because we understand things about our database, what we're trying to do, that our database innately doesn't understand. Finding environment information. This is where me as a consultant, I'm especially sensitive to this for the number of situations where I'm working with a new client, I'm going into a database, they want me to build some reports or some data engineering off of their data, only to find that the database is essentially a black box. There's no intuitive documentation, really little to nobody in the organization has looked at the database, so they know the data exists in there, but they don't know where to find the state of the database, or where that data exists. All of these situations come up for us as database professionals. But if you think about ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, Copilot 365 experiences, they all run into the same consistent problem. We want to use AI to support our work for situations like this, but those solutions don't innately understand my database. They will understand parts of it if I copy and paste DDL statements of create tables and create procedures and such and pass it into my prompt. But that's a whole lot of extra work. Wouldn't it be nice if our database was actually understood directly by our artificial intelligence? That's what we're talking about today. That's what we're talking about with the SSMS Copilot experience. So the overview of this, to be clear, this is in public preview currently. It's been in public preview for good, I want to say 7-8 months plus at this point. And it's a pretty long preview state, but because they are wanting to make sure that this solution is nice and rock solid before they go to generally available. It utilizes databases in a reg pattern. Now, in case anybody here attending or viewing this recording does not understand what a reg pattern is, in summary, think of this problem. Large language models are trained over months of time and are great for identifying patterns. What they're not good with is because it takes months to train, they're not good with keeping up with the times. It just takes too much time to train that data into the model. By the time the model's trained, your question is probably answered by other means. Reg patterns in today's world try to solve that problem by saying the large language model is still good at understanding patterns, but if I can access something like, in this case, a database to get current state information that provides additional context to my prompt, the context with my prompt is then what is provided to the large language model to get a response, one that is not only timely, but gets me the sort of insight I'm actually looking for. Now, the initial experience with SSMS Copilot is prompt and response, but you will find that in more recent versions, there are additional options beyond that. Let's talk about architecture then. Architecture for SSMS Copilot is incredibly simple. First of all, you need to have SSMS 21 or more recently. If you want the current version, which came out last week, which I encourage you to do, it's version 22.2 and then an extra 0.1 at the end. So SSMS 22.2.1 is the version that just came out last week, and that's the version I'm going to be showcasing for you today. If you go to any previous version of SSMS 20 or earlier, this Copilot capability does not exist. Why? Because the solution requires an extension, which extensions started getting introduced into SSMS as part of SSMS 21. Once you've got SSMS 21 or 22 installed, I recommend this version right here. Next part is the AI model. Initially, when I gave this presentation at the start of this being released, you were implementing something like an Azure OpenAI model that you would need to connect in to the endpoint. Microsoft has simplified it now by going with GitHub Copilot. And especially for those concerned about this Copilot experience being in public preview for so long, part of the reason is because of this right here. The community went out and significantly said, we don't want the OpenAI experience, we want the GitHub Copilot experience to make this work. And the developers responded and got that up and running, in my opinion, significantly faster than I expected them to. Major kudos to the development team for that front. But what comes with that is because it's GitHub Copilot, the process of getting access to your models is significantly simplified. And if you still want to work with models that aren't available in GitHub Copilot, maybe you're an organization that has actually gone through the process of developing your own large language model or language model of some kind for generative AI purposes, and you want to use it here, you do have the capability to bring in your own model. Demonstrations to do all of these capabilities are in videos on my YouTube channel, so for sake of time, we're going to gloss over that and configuring the Copilot extension so that we can quickly go and start building content. No inflatable, auto-themed artificial intelligence copilots in existence. Not sure what the intersection is between data nerds and those who have seen the movie Airplane, but we don't need that sort of AI copilot experience here. This one's going to be a little more polished than that one is. All right, enough time in slides. Let's actually talk demonstration. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this out and bring up my experience. So under assumption that you have already gone through the process of going through the installations as I have them laid out in my YouTube videos, you'll get something like this SSMS experience, and I've already connected in to my database environment here. What mainly changes once you do the extensions is two things. Our lovely GitHub Copilot icon up here, and you get this chat window experience here. This opens up, and ooh, just like that, Copilots, yay, the chat experience. But that's not the only place you actually get the Copilot experience. It's the most visible one. Beyond that, you get two other capabilities. One is, suppose I want more code completion approaches like you might get in Visual Studio Code. So let me do like a select star from, let's see, let's do invoices. Invoices is going to be our area of focus today. Notice it's giving me additional information there. That may look like IntelliSense, but it is not. That is GitHub Copilot, which is part of what came out with 22.2.1 last week. So this is fresh off the press. We now have the capability to get inline code completion for writing our queries. All right, our query works nice and easy. The final option that you have is if I hit Alt and backspace on my keyboard, get that there. If I hit Alt backspace, now it's not going to do it. So there is an additional experience here where if I do Alt backspace, you do get a chat window, similar to if you've worked with like the Fabric Notebook experience, where you can do inline Copilot prompting, or Visual Studio, you can do the same. Alt backspace is how you get the same experience here. Now, last thing I'm going to comment on is, at least here it makes sense, but the question I still haven't answered here. SSMS Copilot has access into the database, as I mentioned earlier. But how does it get access into the database? In the chat or in the query editing window, it's not as clear, but the chat window makes it completely clear at the bottom of our screen. Active document. What does it mean by active document? It means the query editor window that I currently have open in SSMS. If I have no query editor window open, this works the same as ChatGPT or Grok's or Gemini's, where it can give generic responses, but it can't give me any context about my database. So I can at least get into it from this active document. What that also means is then security-wise, how is the Copilot getting access to my database in terms of security? Well, what does every query editor window have defined when you're actively working in it? An active connection with an active user connected to it, which innately has some roles or otherwise has been granted permissions into the database. Long story short, the access that you have within the query editor window is the access that Copilot has. If your user that you're logged in with currently has access to 2 of the 5 schemas available in the database, that's all Copilot has access to. If you're logged in with an account that has admin rights, Copilot has admin rights. But again, in current state, the Copilot can only perform read operations. It cannot write or perform those admin functions, which is good because the wrong prompt can take the one situation I had where I created duplicates in a table, and I said, hey, Copilot, get rid of duplicates. And guess what it did? It recognized that 2 records exist that are duplicates of one another. It got rid of both of them, so it got rid of all the data in my table. Not exactly what I wanted, but is that the problem of the AI? No, it's the problem of me as a prompt writer. And until we get effectively in a good spot with those types of capabilities, That's innately why we need to be careful about security and having those concerns in mind before we get too deep into implementing. Fair amount of information in that period of time. So at least wanting to take a moment and pause and say, do we have any open questions or comments so far? While I fix my sticky note. Silence suggests at least I'm not seeing anything in terms of questions.
I don't see any questions too.
Very good. We'll keep going then. So now, here's the fun challenge that I'm going to be trying to work through within our demonstration today. I'm going to try and do some ETL development in the span of about 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm going to try and write a full ETL process within that time frame. Sound crazy? Yes. But AI is all about crazy. So let's go ahead and make that happen. A little bit more information on the situation. I'm new into this database environment, and I know that here in the DBO schema, there is an invoice table, which is what I queried earlier. If I take a look at my other structures in here, it looks like that invoice data does not exist anywhere in the analytical model that is in this environment as well. Now, this is obviously a narrow focus situation where a single database has both an operational database schema and an analytical database schema. For sake of demonstration, humor me, we're trying to at least make this a little bit of a simpler approach. But since I don't have any of those other structures here in my database, that means I have to create things from the ground up. But also, I'm brand new into this environment, which means I need to find my way around here. And as a good consultant, I also, while I'm not being asked to provide recommendations like this, I also think it valuable to say, let's do a quick health check on the environment and say, is there anything I should be concerned about with this database environment? So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and grab a prompt, which I have created earlier. I'm going to paste it into my window here. And let's review this while the prompt runs. Interesting thing that you'll notice here, if you notice, and I went through it a little bit quickly, but the text in here is formatted. The Copilot experience does support and can interpret Markdown, which I think gives us a very interesting opportunity, and you'll see me using it in terms of demonstration today to create prompts that are a little bit more structured. And because of that, makes it a little bit more reusable. So in this case, I'm giving it a fairly simple prompt. I'm new to the database, I'm getting familiar with it. I want a quick overview of things like version information, where it's hosted, backup strategies. We want to make sure that it's got a good backup strategy in place, table row counts and database size, and showing your response what queries you wrote to get this information, doing that more for debugging purposes. Let's see what it gives me for a response.
Yes, there is a small question which you basically already spoke about it, but if you can repeat. Luca is asking what are the prerequisites to be able to use this.
Sorry, can you ask that question again?
Yeah, Luca is asking what are the prerequisites in order to use this. You already spoke about what is the first step, but if he's asking, maybe you can repeat it very fast.
So the prerequisites to do what I'm doing today is, again, start with SSMS and the current version that I have on my t-shirt. Download that, install that. When you install that, there is a, it uses the Visual Studio installer now. Everything that is SSMS 21 and beyond utilizes the Visual Studio installer to make this work. When you go through that process, you will get an opportunity to select extensions you want to install. When you get in there, there will be one specifically for Copilot, so you want to check that one. That installs the Copilot extension. Once you get that installed, all I had to do was that would make the GitHub section up here in the upper right corner of the screen show up. And GitHub Copilot is a subscription-based solution that is based off of you having an account on the GitHub website. So in this case, I do have an account, and I already went through and I essentially went into SSMS. It prompted me to sign into my GitHub account, and that got me to here where now this Copilot is active. So right now this is using, I'm doing a GitHub Copilot Pro license, so the $10 a month. I know they have the free version of the experience. If you're going to use that with this experience, I'll say you're going to get maybe 20 to 30 minutes of experience out of it before you hit the token limit. So I would encourage you to go for the pro subscription, or depending on the state of your organization, maybe consider going for enterprise licensing if that's what makes sense for your org. Alrighty. So let's see what we got from our prompt. So an overview, server information. Notice some interesting things it picked up on first and foremost. In terms of overview, it figured out what you could probably see if you looked carefully at the URL that I'm connected in with right now. Looks like a bunch of GUID information. This is a Fabric SQL database environment. Sorry, Ronan, do you have a question?
No, there are no questions.
Okay, cool. So it was able to notice not just that this is an Azure SQL DB instance, but that this is specifically hosted in Fabric. And that does mean certain limitations where Fabric SQL, we're not doing as much of index optimization and backup strategies. A lot of that's built in to the product. But it is nice that when I prompted specifically the way that I did, I'm getting information about the environment and I'm getting the queries that it used so that I can prove out what it actually gave me. To at least prove out this one, I'm going to go ahead and hit apply in my window. And when you hit apply, think of it as essentially it's going to try and merge the code from the chat window into your query editor window, doing a differential between the two. In this case, there's no commonality, so I'm just going to hit tab. If I run that, there we go. Similar information, although within that, it was still able to figure out beyond this query that we were able to get into Fabric, and that this is Fabric. Let's see. That's also where it's going to try and do certain things, but it will hit certain limitations like this, where it did try to query things like database size. But depending on the approach that you use, because this is Fabric SQL, it may not always work. So things like this, I can't get this information because it's not something I directly have access to in this case. If I were to use this in something like an actual Azure SQL DB, managed instance, on-prem database, I would expect that it would be able to give me things like the database size. Table row counts. It had us focusing on the invoice table and says that, all right, we've only got about 1,400 records. It's not a whole lot, so either this is a new database or maybe this is for demonstration purposes. Why would this be for demonstration purposes? Moving on, backup strategies. It's able to find even the backup definition of things. And at the end of any prompt that I give it, the nice thing about the Copilot experience is it does specifically highlight what is the connection that was used to query my database and to get a response. Pretty nice. All right, so I've got some information there, maybe no glaring concerns there. What about, well, let's make sure at least that where I want to get invoice information is actually where I want to get it from. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare another prompt. This prompt is going to take a little bit of extra editing because in this case, I'm using a structured approach where I want to, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. I want to do more structured prompts here with an important point I'll make on the next prompt after this. So let's see, we're looking at invoice data. Count purposes. We're probably going to be doing financial stuff, so we'll be looking at amounts. Let's see, data types. So I'm trying to at least identify, suppose a situation where I'm new to this database, the database isn't very well documented, or maybe it's a very complex schema of something like Great Plains databases, for example, has a whole lot of structures in them, and depending on how Great Plains is used, where invoicing data lines up isn't always guaranteed to be the same place. So what I'm going to give it is a more extensive prompt that essentially says this. And I'm going to shift from the model that I've been using so far. This is using the bring your own model approach. So this is a Azure OpenAI model that was deployed. But here you can also see the long list of items available, a couple of standard and a lot of premium models. As you might expect, the premium models do give you a better experience, but if you do go for these, make sure you double check this, because even with my GitHub Copilot Pro license, I do not have infinite use of this. I'm already at about 75 to 80% of my utilization for the month just prepping this demonstration. So I'm going to go ahead and go to GPT-4.1. Oh, and actually let's kill that because there's one thing I forgot to mention. We're going to copy that again. Now, why I stopped it here is, as I mentioned, it is trying to use the active document. What I have open, though, isn't a query window. It's a markdown document that I have, which doesn't innately have access into the database. So I'm going to shift over here. Now let's try and give it the prompt. I'll double check that it kept my changes. Yes, it did. Great. Doesn't look as nice as formatted here, but that's because I copied and pasted it. Now, what we should see pretty quickly is that it's generating queries, as I would expect, where it's trying to get into the system tables, into the database, to try and identify properties that might make sense for the situation that I'm looking for. But the fact that it actually gave me the responses here means it actually ran those queries against my database and gave me responses. In this case, suggested that depending on the type of analysis that I'm doing, maybe the amount is like the base amount on the invoice, total amount includes something like tax, the net amount maybe is the margins if they manage that on the invoice for some reason. But in any case, this is proof right here. It got access into my database schema, and that's what it used to generate the response. And the nice thing, especially since we're talking GitHub Copilot, I'll speak from experience of when we were in early preview on this. Using something like a GitHub Copilot 4.0 model, which was what we could use initially, with this experience, the responses we got back were decent, but nowhere near as sophisticated as this. This is because the GitHub Copilot experience does a lot more work where the app itself is giving you more sophisticated response than just what the a base large language model can provide. That app is doing wonders here. All right, this invoice information looks pretty good. Let's see. All right, so now I need to actually, like, we're already a good 5-10 minutes into looking at this. I haven't actually written any code here. Well, first I want to make sure I actually have a good data for me to use for this prompt. So I want to generate some more test data. Now, the key here that I want to talk about, and this is something that I've had some discussions with people on over the community, is when I am trying to do something with a Copilot experience like this, should I be looking at writing very simple, short prompts to my Copilot in order to get a good response from it? Or should I be more verbose? I say this honestly from multiple presenters I've seen about this. Gene, I know, I believe has talked about this in some of the sessions he's given in the community on this topic. I would look at it this way. The more sophisticated of a response you want in your response from your Copilot, the more information that you need to give it, aka you need to give it more instructions. Case in point here, I'm going to give it a very simple prompt that says, take a look at this invoice table, and I want to generate 5,000 records. So give me a query that generates 5,000. Losing part of my versioning. All right. It's going to take a moment to generate that. Let's go ahead and apply it into our window, and let's take a look. So what it gave me is a very actually sophisticated approach because it went the approach of recursion, which is funny because early versions of this this prompt would actually go the cursor route of defining a cursor and iterating through it 5,000 times. So this is trying to go the really advanced route and gives me this sort of information. But something weird is going on here for sure, because if I take a quick look at my invoice schema, it's generating four columns of data. I have well over 10 to 15 columns in this table, and it's not giving me the actual structure here. This does happen on occasion, and I think this is, again, part of the reason why this is still in preview, is now and again, sometimes when you prompt it, you'll tell it to actually check the database, and it won't actually check the database. So let's give it another shot and see if it can figure out. Retry the last prompt, but look at the DBO invoices table to determine what columns need to be populated. Let's see what it gives us for a response. And notice the difference there. When it gave us the initial prompt, it just took a look at our reference here. When we got down here, notice it has this extra item here, ran get table column names. This is where you can tell for sure that your prompt is actively taking actions against your database to use it as context for your prompt. Let's go ahead and apply this into our window. And this is where the differential experience is kind of nice because the iterative experience of it. Now I can see the changes that it made. And when I do this differential approach, typically I'll have two options. One, I can tab to accept, or I can Alt-Delete to discard. We'll just hit tab to accept it. It maintained the recursion approach, but now look at that. It is generating records, or it's generating data, 5,000 records for all of my columns. But still, admittedly, this isn't going to be all that great, because look at what it does here for things like first name and last name. First and N, which is the iterator. It's just going to iterate through, and you're going to get first one, first two, last two, first three, last three, all the way to 5,000. Does that really sound like legitimate data to you? No. Is it valuable for things like bulk testing of the performance of this table at very large scales? Yes, this will work just fine. But if we want to do more sophisticated testing, where we want our data to look like actual experiences, that's where we need to do more work. For things especially like employee ID and customer ID, there are more than 100 employees here. And it did not take the time to check that. So again, a very simple prompt like this may not give you exactly the response that you're looking for, because what are copilots good at? This copilot clearly shows it knows, once we tell it to actually look at the database, it knows what technically a database can do. It knows technically our structure, the number of columns, the data types. It figured out all of those things, and it made some decent attempts at things like currency code and payment terms and status, where it made a decent attempt at trying to do something that replicates what the business world does. But that's as far as it went. It couldn't do anything super sophisticated, because what would we expect to make that happen? Business context. And just from a database schema, Copilot can't figure out how your business works, how your humans work. It can only understand how the database works. All right, quick drink break. Last thing, at least I have prepared as a demonstration here, and this is where, what situations does this Copilot work well for? Things like getting environment information or getting analysis of how the database technically is performing. I think DBAs are greatly going to like this, because if they want to say this particular query is not performing well, analyze the database and assess why it's not performing well and give recommendations on how to resolve it. You give it the query, it can understand the database and has access into the statistics, query store. If you are working in a database environment that has query store enabled, it will be able to access that to figure out the telemetry of what's going on and what needs to be remedied. Doesn't mean it will give you the perfect answer. No, we should still be critical all the same, but maybe saves us a little bit of the legwork and gives us an initial hypothesis of what the circumstance could be. My favorite thing, though, to do with this experience is pattern replication. This should come as a shock, because what are large language models? Identifying patterns. So as soon as I saw this experience, I asked myself, how well is a solution like this at being able to follow a pattern? Let's see what the demonstration I've got prepped for you today. All right. Now this is a very, very large prompt. Not just because I have it zoomed in. It's actually a very large prompt. So we're going to copy this. I'm going to paste this over. Double check that I am in an active query editor window that has an active connection into my database. Let's go ahead and let that execute. And while it's running, let's talk through the prompt. You'll see that I do this in a couple of my prompts here, and this is an approach that I've been using now with this, and it seems to work pretty well. I think the markdown at least helps it process it, but I've done it without the markdown, and it still has a pretty decent shot of understanding it. So up here is a section of parameter information. And then the base prompt here is, as I said about already 15 minutes ago, I want to create a process that is able to ETL data from the operational invoices table into a final fact table. Let's see what it gives us in terms of response. And you can already see here, look at all the information that I have in here about defining the structure of the tables. The goal here, though, is that the parameters are only what needs to change, and otherwise the prompt itself doesn't change, but it is based off of things that I understand about the design, and I want the Copilot to replicate. All right, it's still thinking, but let's see what it gives us. So here's a summary of recommended next steps. Now, a couple key things that I intentionally test this on to see if it can figure it out. I gave it information about a stored procedure that is sort of my ideal approach to processing this data. So this is at least a template that I wanted to follow. And otherwise, I gave it information about some table structures that I want to create. But otherwise, as far as understanding what is the intended design of those tables, what's the staging table's purpose and its design? What's the final fact table? Should I have any metadata columns in there? I have some of that parameterized, but otherwise I'm asking it based off of what the templated stored procedure does. Let's see what it gave us for a response. Identified very quickly, DBO invoices existed. We've already queried that, we know. The staging table and the fact table did not exist yet. So it knows it needs to create those tables. And it did a quick profile of our DBO invoice table. Give us our schema for that table. Metadata columns, it also did an assessment. And based on the source tables that it was looking at, aka sales transactions, these are the metadata columns that are in effect. So recommended for table creation, we need to create staging invoices. We need to create fact invoices. And sometimes in a situation like this, even though I told it to create the tables, sometimes you need to give it an extra response. So write the scripts to create these tables. All right, it's running validated generated T-SQL. That's good. That means we're actually accessing the database. And look at that. We've got our staging invoices table. I'd have to double check all the data types, but for the most part, these look specific enough that I think these are accurate. It added in the metadata columns at the very end, which is ideally what we would want it to do. We don't want it randomly interspersed. So it is, again, following pattern of the table design. And then it's creating our final fact table with that same information as well. An initial scan, and again, for sake of test, because this is a test I've done a couple of times before, we're going to go ahead and apply this. Run it. Uh-oh, it gave us stuff that can't run. Although it actually, I think, still technically ran. It just did it transactionally. Nope, it did not. Okay. Well, as we always expect, sometimes the Copilot experience isn't perfect. But critically, I know that, all right, the way that it's doing things and checking for schemas, it added in a bunch of these text points and actually added that in here as well. That's where it actually gave us that within the experience here, which is not really what we wanted it to do. It's probably getting confused between the fact that I'm changing between a SQL window and a Markdown window, because this format would make sense for Markdown. Let's go ahead and clear that out. Now it runs. So again, we still need to know what we need to expect out of it, out of our database environment. Quick check here. Let's refresh. All right, we got invoices. Good. Go to the fact table. There's our invoice table as well. All right, tables are created. Now let's create the procedure. For that, I need the rest of this really long prompt. Keep it in here. And I'm going to at least get rid of the section that's about building tables. Yeah. Nope, that's not the one I asked you to copy. Let's get the whole thing. Select the whole text. Let's copy. Get rid of that. Paste that in here. All right, now this has a more elaborate prompt around needing to build a stored procedure with the same parameters. And there's at least one edit of a line I need to know in here, which is I'm making the distinction of, does it know to expect that this table is a fact table, or a dimension table? And if so, this is a place where I can specifically identify what is the STD type that I would need to follow if it is a dimension. All right, we're there. Connected into my query editor window. Got my right database environment there. Let's go ahead and run that. So let's see what we get for a response. This one may take a little bit of time to run. But here again, do I go with a simple prompt or a complicated prompt? Through my own testing, and for sake of time, I'm not going to do this live here, but I do, well, we'll see how long this one takes. But if I try and do this with a simple, like, create a stored procedure that processes things from fact, or from the DBO invoice table to the fact invoice table, it can create a successful stored procedure that is able to get data from point A to point B. It does it just fine, and it'll create functional code. But as a developer, we need to take that additional step and think, I want this to be consistent architecture. I don't want every ETL for every table to look different. This is an artwork. This needs to be a consistent structure. Because it needs to be a consistent structure, we need to make sure that it follows a consistent process for the Copilot, repeated time after time again, that we get the same deterministic response. And especially if you're looking at doing this with a team of developers, you don't want necessarily different developers to have different responses back, which will mean different tables may have different ETL structures as all of that goes along. So I'm writing a very extensive prompt here. But the prompt is calling out a lot of things that I feel like needs to be addressed. Things like making sure that if there's a natural ID, that it gets replaced with a surrogate key at some point. Checking for any foreign key relationships, because if I identify foreign key relationships in the source database, that helps identify where I need to translate from a natural key in the operational database to a surrogate key, which I'd be using in the analytical model. But that only works in a simple situation if they're all SCD type 1 dimensions. If they're SCD type 2 and I have multiple versions, then I need to add in additional text that talks about what SCD type 2 looks like and how I want them to handle it. Do I want the current version of the record? Do I want the version of the record that was applicable as of a date on the invoice? A whole lot of extra information in there. But what it comes back with is going to blow your mind a little bit. Let's see if it works. I'm going to apply it in here, and let's take a look at what it generated. We expect this to be an iterative process, and we have a staging table, which means more often than not, after each run, we have to truncate that table or otherwise clear out any intermediate data sitting in there. We want to do a fresh run. Batch ID. All right. Well, maybe we're doing some logging within this environment. So I want to make sure that I have a batch ID generated that uniquely identifies the run of this process. Begin try. All right, that means we're doing try catch here. If I go all the way to the bottom here, yep, we're doing try catch. So we're logging errors in a staging table. And then our process, we insert into our staging table from our DBO table, passing in information like the batch ID or get date where it makes sense for things like the ETL batch ID and the inserted date. All right, good. It knows well enough that that's typically what we would expect there. Looks good. Then to go from stage to fact, it's doing a merge, which, I mean, people may agree to disagree on whether you go merge, whether you go insert and update as separate steps. Me, actually, I'm more that way, but the reason this is this way is because this entire database that you're seeing here, I've written little to no code on this. This has all been generated by working with this Copilot experience, just to see how sophisticated it could get. And in this case, it seemed to want to go the direction of merge. All right, that's fine. Here we can see it followed my instructions, where this is a situation where Invoices have two lookups, one for an employee, one for a customer. And going from stage to fact is when it's doing a lookup to find the surrogate key. So it's doing that translation, is current equal to 1, -1. It also understands what the unknown record is in those tables. Just kind of cool too. Or at least it understands that from the pattern that I gave it. Probably more the latter. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. All right. In terms of logic here, does updates well when not matched. It inserts new records. Looks good. Then this section looks a little bit odd. Notice what it's doing. So we generated that batch ID earlier. Now it has two statements here. One that's inserting a record into the run log saying it's in progress. And then another statement that's updating that record and is immediately saying that it's completed. Okay, in terms of ETL design, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would you say in progress and then immediately complete things after everything else functional has already completed? An important fact here in that this is an intentional test. This is something I put in here as a red herring for it to assess, are you going to follow pattern Copilot or are you going to do the smart thing? Let's take a look at the procedure it was based off of. Process sales transactions. And at least from an initial scan of it, look at its structure. Truncate table, declaring that batch ID. Sales transactions and the way that that's formatted, the way that it's doing the key lookups. With that -1 is null. It got that from the pattern. In this case, it's doing something with hash bytes. Our table, we weren't doing anything with hashing. Gave us our merge statement, so that's why we know why it went that route. And sure enough, the logging in my pattern procedure isn't what would make sense for an actual production approach. But is that a problem with the Copilot? No. In a situation like this, if you truly want this to be a pattern-focused environment, you don't want it to be going off and saying, well, in my AI-informed opinion, this is the way that you should be writing your ETL process. Because if you do that, you'll get nothing but chaos. Here, we can prove with what we just did here, it chose to follow pattern, even if business process and typical ETL design-wise, logically, this doesn't make sense for logging purposes. Now the big test, though. Does it work? Let's see if an initial pass it does work. All right, it was able to create a successful procedure. Let's execute it. That's not what I want. I want invoices. Moment of truth. Subquery returned more than one value. The initial pass didn't quite work. Which probably talks more about the state of the database. So that suggests that somehow here, even with checking with is current, these tables have multiple is currents. Well, that's not great. So we at least have to investigate, but for the sake of getting this up and running, we'll just do a quick bug fix. So I'll ask my Copilot. The key lookups are the key lookup subqueries are returning more than one value or one record. Fix the lookups to give us to always pick only one record. And this is more, I could tell it specifically what we wanted to do, which is like a top one. Sometimes, at least for sake of testing purposes, I intentionally will write them a little bit vague, just to see how well the Copilot responds. My goodness, version 2 does not like being up here today. Not sure what's going on. I run through so many sticky notes on this shirt, you have no idea. Like, patching a shirt is not nearly as easy as patching something like SSMS. maybe that's true, but I'm sure Aaron Stellato will disagree with me. Let's see here. All right, it's still running. So at least scan up here. And here's the fix that it's putting in. So top one, it did at least determine that that's what I wanted it to do. Put in a top one. And here we should be able to quickly prove once this prompt finishes if it was, as I was saying earlier, deterministic enough of that's the only thing it changed. It didn't change anything else in terms of the procedure. All right, prompt completed. Let's take our new procedure. Let's apply it in to give us a quick differential. Okay, it got rid of the section as above. We'll discard that change. Here, replacing that with, and it changed the formatting on it. If I had anything in here in terms of formatting, which I'm waiting to at least get some confirmation on whether there's a possibility, there's going to be a good solution for that to encourage good formatting here, but I just don't have that in the prompt right now. That looks good, so we'll accept that. And that was the only change. It did not change anything else. All right. Well, the procedure already exists, so let's go to alter. So it fixes that. Let's run it. Command completed successfully. If we do a quick test, there we go. There is our final fact table processed by a ETL process that was entirely generated by Copilot Experience with a good pattern procedure, aka with database context in play. And technically speaking, because I was talking about it and we ran into some planned issues and whatnot, took closer to what, 20 minutes? But imagine how much time it would take just to write out all of this code, to write the create table statements, to write the procedure for what is just replicating a pattern, which a lot of times ETL is intended to be. We like patterns for consistency. Something like this could easily take me 4 hours plus to do this work. And for something that is more complicated or has more columns on the table, that's just more writing time. That here, with a well-designed prompt, which I've engineered quite a bit, so it's not like I took 5 minutes to generate this prompt. This prompt took a lot of engineering time up front. But now I've got something that's easily parameterized and can be used to replicate invoices tables or any other tables that exist in this environment that I want to create initial versions of ETL. And then I can move on to some more nuanced things where maybe I have to implement specific transformation rules or implement business logic, which I can either write by hand or I can continue the conversation with Copilot. Let's see here. So possible circumstances, and this is at least where I want to talk through a little bit of this resource here, because this at least is a bit off topic, but talks about a fun resource available along with this SSMS Copilot experience. This is a database, or sorry, this is a project solution that I have open in SSMS. When what I've done here is I've created a library for myself of useful prompts using the same sort of parameterization approach for things like the data profiling that I talked about earlier, some DBA tasks. So if I'm needing to check foreign key constraints, recommendations around indexing that I talked about earlier, I've got a prompt for that with some parameterization in place. I've got the demonstrations that I used today, environment overviews in here. But additional things that I could do, create unknown records. That's something that would typically follow patterns. Metadata columns follow patterns. Data type impact analysis. That's one that I've been working on more recently to assess suppose business rules have changed and a data type in something in my ETL process, the data type is changing from one data type to another. Well, that could have significant implications in terms of not just my ETL process, but maybe like stored procedures that are used for reporting purposes within the database. This is a prompt that helps me quickly assess, this is a change that I'm going to make. Can you, Copilot, help me analyze my database and determine the implications of what that change would mean? Does it 100% work? Some of these I'm still early on in testing of it, but take a moment to think of the possibilities. How much time, going back to our initial questions, does it take to do these operations? And where's there opportunity to save time on things that we do regularly, day in and day out? As an engineer, a lot of these are focused on engineering focuses. But again, DBAs will probably have a great use case for this. People who are query writers and maybe just need to work with the final dimensional model that I created. Maybe they get their own library as well. There's so much potential here if we think about it. All right, getting to be about time here, so let's quick recap. So the things that we've talked about. Query window, we can do that connections. Chat window, or doing inline edits of our code. I at least couldn't get the one to up and running, which I tested that this morning. It worked fine, so why it's not working now? I don't know, but I've seen it work. Trust me. Please trust me. And then in future state, again, what we're looking at is in current state, we're only talking read capabilities of the Copilot, but be aware, write is on the horizon. So plan accordingly on that if you're going to adopt this. But all of the things that we could do, getting environmental information about versions, I forget if this prompt showed it to us, but typically it shows the compatibility level. So if I want to use specific keywords that are in more recent compatibility levels of SQL, I can find that out through a prompt rather quickly. Creating test data worked all right, but it's good for bulk loading, but it's not good for actually logistic data. And pattern replication. Anything that involves replicating a pattern, expect that it's going to do very well. So we can ask Copilot to do anything, and that's your question to think about. What scenarios could you benefit from with a Copilot? So our big takeaways today, and intentionally I haven't talked about things like finances. SSMS Copilot, if you're looking to implement it, is about saving time. Will you innately get cost savings? Well, translating time as money, yes. But if we look at it purely from a financial standpoint, I think we'll miss out on the bigger narrative of saving time on things that aren't value add so that we can focus on things like research. What is the best practice to do in these situations? How should I be updating my patterns so that my ETLs run effectively in the environments? None of this changes the fact that you need to know what you're doing. Because if you don't know what you're doing, AI can't innately tell you how to fix it unless you know how to fix it yourself. It excels well at following patterns when context is given. Again, expect that especially as you get started, you might be writing longer prompts. But if you go on with the mindset of not only writing a longer prompt, but doing it in a way that's reusable, then there's a lot of potential for reuse, and that makes that time worth it. And again, it's going to focus more on technical understanding. It understands how a database works. It doesn't understand what your naming convention is for invoice numbers and why it exists that way. So if you're running into issues with this experience, do tell it to check your database. Sometimes it might just forget to look. If you actually tell it to and look for those prompts, you'll find it is actually looking at your database. Don't be afraid to be iterative. Have that chat experience and just don't break production, please. It's going to be easy now, but in the future, those write capabilities are coming back. Brings us towards at least the end of the story here, but an important thing to note of where this story should go. Hopefully this gives you some ideas of things to think about. And maybe you saw things that were great and you really liked them. Maybe you, like me, see some things about this that are concerning and need to be improved. If this is you and you want to see this product improve from what I showed today, go out to this site and give feedback. This is part of the Visual Studio developer community site. They have a page specifically for SSMS to give feedback. Think along the lines of Power BI ideas or Fabric ideas. Same principle here, but this is specifically targeted to SSMS, both for the UI experience, but also GitHub Copilot is included in that as well. So as you have ideas, post them out there. Or if you don't have ideas, but you like some of what I've seen here and you want to see it improved, same voting sequence they use out there as they do in other areas. So if nothing else, go out there and vote. I know at least I have a couple that I've been really trying to get people to vote on because some of it highlights what concerns there could be around security if my admin account now has an AI that can write and manipulate objects in my database. I'm a little bit scared. I'd like some more controls over that, please. Last thing I'll note too, and this is sort of a kind of an exciting announcement. For those watching this today, you are seeing me release publicly something that I've been working on for a couple of months now and that you have publicly available to get started. What I showcased today of all those prompts are contained in what I'm calling DB Prompt Library. It's a GitHub repository that I'm creating for educational purposes and to help people get started with writing prompts for a solution like this that has database context in mind. So if you are interested in jumping into this and aren't sure where to get started with prompts, take a look at my repository. It's free. It's available to the public. And honestly, there too, I'm not really a guru when it comes to repos. So if there's any weird stuff there, please let me know. But also, if you have any additional ideas of how a prompt library like this could support the community more widely, please let me know in my with my contact information. I would love feedback on this to see if there's some potential for this to help the community significantly. That brings us to the end of today's story. So before I open it up for any final questions or comments, the QR code there goes to my YouTube channel. I mentioned some demo videos about the setup of SSMS Copilot and such. Take a look at my YouTube channel. Be sure to like, subscribe. The YouTube algorithm likes it. That'll help more people find out about this. So make sure at least you get out there and engage with that. But hopefully those videos will, with this presentation, will help you get started. If there's any other follow-up you want to do or anything you want me to research like this, most of the content I create is based on people's questions. So if you have any genuine questions, find me out on LinkedIn. Either search for my name, Jared Kuehn, or DataBard. I'm probably the only DataBard out there. And connect with me. I'd be happy to connect with you and engage in dialogue on the topic. And otherwise, Blue Sky is about the only other social media that I am currently using today. With that, that's all I have, unless there are any final questions or comments. Does anybody have anything?
I don't see anything coming up in review or in published. Thank you so much, Jared. This is a great session. We definitely have to post this on YouTube and we have to review again. Thank you so much for providing the LinkedIn as well. So you can connect Jared on LinkedIn. Any questions if anybody have? I know we are out of time here, but any last minute questions if you have? I don't see anything coming, so I think we are good then. Thank you so much, Jared. One more time. This is a great session. And so many applauses are coming. So nice.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back again. Always a pleasure to support this community because of how active it is. And again, I'm here to support the community. So any way I can help, please, anybody, let me know. That's what I'm here for. Other than that, go on and write your next chapter on your data journey.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Until we see you next week. Don't forget to register for the next week if you'd like to attend. So I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much, Jared, one more time, and have a great day, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Good to see you.
to see you too.